the Center for Global Finance Seminar this afternoon. And it's addressing a critically important issue regarding China investment in Africa. And the research has been running for a couple of years in many directions. And today we're delighted to have Hong and Rodiat present a paper that takes the research into a unique direction that very much draws on a farm level data to understand the complexities of China investment in Africa. You may have seen a lot of literature, especially coming from the macro dimension at country level, looking at the looming debt crisis in Africa, some of it related to do with the high exposure to Chinese investment, but that's a different literature altogether. And today we will focus and want to explore a number of dimensions, which Hong and Rodiat will go into. Now, both Hong and Rodiat are based here at SOAS, the Center for Global Finance. And so to many of you, perhaps it doesn't, there's no need for a detailed introduction. However, it's always a great pleasure to introduce the people that have been working on this paper tirelessly for a couple of years. So let me start by introducing Hong, who is a colleague here in the Center for Global Finance, actually Deputy Director of the Center for Global Finance. He's a professor in financial economics and received his undergraduate training in economics from Lanzhou University in China, an MSc from Min University in China, and another MSc from London School of Economics at LSE, and a PhD from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. She's very prolific. She has researched mainly in the areas of financial economics, including the main issues tackled over so many years, over the last 20 years: farm investment decisions and uncertainty, capital market imperfections, comparative financial systems, corporate finance issues, corporate governance, and a lot on the Chinese economies. And recently linking those developments as farm level corporate finance for China with corporate finance for Africa. She has indeed published in the top journals in her profession, including the Journal of Corporate Finance, the Review of Finance, Regional Studies, Journal of Banking and Finance, Economica, European Journal of Finance. I could go on and on and on. So we are delighted to have this high-profile prolific researcher with us to share with us some of her research. She's working on this paper jointly with the Lawal, Rodiat, Yetunde, who is a very active a young researcher as a final year PhD candidate here in the School of Finance and Management at SOAS, working closely with the Hongbo and being sponsored under the prestigious Commonwealth Scholarship Commission of the UK. She's also professionally qualified. She's a chartered accountant and also a chartered banker. So you have like an accountant, a finance expert, and banker. And she holds an MSc in finance from the University of Ilorin in Nigeria, one of the prestigious universities in Nigeria, and worked as a lecturer in finance at the same university. Her research has focused on many important issues, including government policies and infrastructure development, the development benefits of Africa's romance with the world, developed world, the behavior of financial markets in the face of global uncertainty, simply the uncertainty we are going through, and also now on corporate finance decisions involving Chinese firms and African firms. So we're absolutely delighted to have both Hong and Rodiat sharing their research with us this afternoon. This is work in progress. And in the spirit of the Center for Corporate for Global Finance, we ask you to be generous with your comments. No comment is small or minor in the sense that it helps everybody think about the work. And feel free, of course, to come up with a comment as we go, but possibly better to wait at the end if you are still around. Now, post your questions or comments in the chat, and I'll give you an opportunity to go through those questions. And also you can put up your hand. Of course, if you are rushing to go and you are here within the first 1 hour, we don't want to miss your comments. Please feel free to raise your hand and I will allow you to intervene. This meeting is recorded, and of course, as we do always in Center for Global Finance, we share the recording with you later after the seminar. Okay, so once again, welcome. And once again, Hong and Rodiat, you have the floor. Thank you.
Lawal, can you put up the transparency? Yeah. Okay. So I think we organized the presentation in the way that Lawal and me are going to present. Actually, Victor is a causer, and Victor is waiting for some questions. So I'm going to actually cover the first part of the paper and basically set up the scene and talk about the theory, underlying theories, and the hypothesis. And then Lawal is going to take over and talking about the empirical part. And then we can have some discussions. So yes, so if you remember last year, we presented another paper also on this topic, but that was done by another PhD student, and we are in the process of revising that paper at the moment. So this is basically another paper on the same topic. So again, still China's infrastructure investment, but this time we focus on Africa. So Lawal, can you go down? So I'm going to actually start from the motivation of the research. And I mean, Africa, so in another paper, we actually covered the whole, countries that have received Chinese infrastructure investment. It's a global context. And here we have Africa only. And we have Africa only because we think the issue that we are going to address in this paper is particularly important for Africa or for African countries. So we have already heard quite a lot of Chinese involvement in Africa. It covers a lot of different aspects, aids and trade, lending, and OFDI. So as I can see that, and I'm sure people have already read a lot of things on those subtopics, and each of them, I can say, they have their own literature. So our paper fits in actually OFDI, but OFDI for that is we already seen a lot of existing studies. However, we are not going to talk about the ordinary OFDI. So normally people talk about OFDI, Chinese OFDI in Africa covering merger and acquisitions, direct investment undertaken by private firms. In this paper, we talk about that specific type of direct investment, and that is infrastructure investment. So as you can see that I gave you at least just the one example in terms of the statistics showing how important it is. If you compare the Chinese infrastructure investment in Africa with the traditional investors, the traditional donors, let's say the organizations or firms from advanced market economic systems. So China has already, taken over. And in terms of if you paid some attention to this type of statistic, you already know that China is now the largest lender to developing countries. So why, Lawal, can I have the next one, please? So why are we interested in this infrastructure investment? So rather than the normal OFDI. So here I actually summarized the differences between the investment that we are talking about in this paper and the traditional, OFDI, Chinese OFDI in Africa. So first of all, we all know that Chinese infrastructure investment is of course, is very big, is larger than the normal OFDI projects. But more importantly, for this type of investment projects, there are very often bilateral lending or financing involved between the Chinese government and the host country. So that is a very important feature of this type of investment. We do not very often see, we see very little about this bilateral long, arrangement between two countries. So the second feature of this type of investment is that it's very often because the Chinese government provides finance to do those projects, and that financing or the contract is very often tied to the selection of the project contractors and even the procurement of the project. And that's why you often hear that actually, if you look at some airports or dams or railways, probably you will see that it is Chinese people who are doing that. They even brought in equipment, materials, because this type of financing contract is tied to the selection of who are doing this and to the procurement of the project. And that is very important because you know that because this is financed by the Chinese government. And you can imagine many of those project contractors are chosen to be Chinese state-owned enterprises. And that differs between the project that we are working on and the normal OFDI project, because normal projects, you will see a lot of private enterprises. Here, they are representing the Chinese government to undertake such project. Therefore, we understand why people are talking about, non-economic motivations of this type of project. So the next difference between infrastructure project and the normal project is that actually the destination of this type of projects are very often developing and emerging markets. So, and this is particularly the case after 2013, after the BRI approach. Actually, there is a typo here. So, so that's something that we are talking about. Remember, it is in that project, there is a long money involved, and they are mainly undertaken by Chinese SOEs, and the recipient countries are mainly emerging and developing countries. Lawal, can I have another one, please? So therefore, we heard that there are a lot of debates going on. So particularly in the context of African recipient countries, we heard that China is doing something new, colonizing Africa. So, and of course, we heard a lot of that maybe reports or media reports that are based on maybe cases, some individual cases saying that, China is doing something very, harmful in African countries and etc. There are a lot of stories, environmental, social responsibilities, etc. But we ask, we investigate, we want to get some evidence to see whether or not Chinese investors can have some impact on the firm level. So therefore, you can see later, our data is very special. We actually matched the Chinese firms that are involved in those projects, and we identified who the local firms are that are also involved in those Chinese infrastructure projects. So therefore, we ask the following questions. First of all, we want to see whether or not those local African firms, whether or not they can benefit from this type of involvement. And by that, we compare the involved local firms in Africa with the non-involved firms. Okay, whatever we are talking about, we compare them. And then we also, Lava, up, please. The last one, please. Yes, so there is another research question that we are going to actually investigate, and that is whether or not there are some differences even between, different subsets of the involved firms. So for that one, we pick up a moderating factor, and that is absorptive capacity. So we compare the behavior or the outcome between the involved indigenous African firms and the involved foreign firms. They are foreign, but they operate in Africa. So that's basically the question. And in terms of the contributions, that's those type of things, it requires a lot of hard thinking. And actually, we were rejected already, and not only for one time, maybe 2 or 3 times. So they pushed us to think harder every time about the contributions. So I can summarize as the following. First of all, we think we can make a contribution to the existing research on Chinese traditional OFDI because, as I just explained, they cannot reflect the state capitalism nature of Chinese government-financed infrastructure investment. So we contributed to that, and we also, I think we can contribute because studies based on Chinese ordinary OFDI, very often they cover the sample before 2013, because after 2013 BRI, people, you see many more infrastructure investment. So that's the first one. And the second literature that we think we are connected and we make some contribution to is this overseas infrastructure investment. By that I mean we have seen some papers, publications on BRI related projects, and people know that they are mainly infrastructure, related projects. So our paper differs from them because in this growing literature on BRI-related project, people are talking about, first of all, the trade, whether the connectivity effect, i.e., by setting up facilities, so you make the connections that reduces the cost of transportation. So the cost of trading is much lower, and that is good for all the countries, BRI countries. So on the country level, they discuss the connectivity impact on trade. Another literature on BRI refers to the debt problem. So they very often talk about, you set up the debt trap for those recipient countries. So those are the existing literature. We differ because we investigate the firm behavior on the firm level. We investigate, the interactions between local firms and Chinese firms. And another thing is for Africa, we have looked at the literature. We think we contributed in the sense that we actually extend the studies of Chinese investment in Africa from the macro level, country level to firm level. And also our research is also related to the IB literature, international business literature, and we think we can contribute to this literature as well, because in this literature, when the connection or interaction between foreign investors and local firms is concerned, they very often talk about the productivity spillover effect. Whereas in this paper, we extend this type of channel to the signaling channel. We ask another additional question, whether or not the stock market will be reacting to this type of interaction. So in terms of the literature, actually, we, as you can see, that it combines corporate finance, international business, development, economics, etc. But let me focus on two things. One is the IB literature on the linkage between foreign direct investment and local firms, and that is something that I have already mentioned. They focused on the productivity spillover channel. Okay, so they say if you have some foreign direct investment in this country, local firms unavoidably they will have some opportunities to be affected, to be involved, or to be to do the business with foreign investors. So by that they say there are some spillovers, productivity spillover, and the item that I listed here are the factors that can change the productivity spillover effect, i.e. you need to look at whether or not you are connected, local firms are connected to the foreign investors through which type of connection. So FDI can be vertical, can be horizontal. Horizontal is more market oriented, but vertical is more efficient, resource seeking, etc. So people found that actually for backward linkage, i.e. if the local firm is a kind of upstream firm, upstream, so it's backward connected, then there is a productivity spillover effect. And they say it because there are some different channels. So why do we see some spillover, productivity spillover? It's because foreign investors can provide direct assistance to local firms. Because foreign investors, they require local firms to upgrade their quality, because they are supplying some intermediary goods to those foreign investors, and there are some scale effects. And there are some papers in which people are discussing maybe this spillover effect differs depending on the motivation of investment. So very often people would think a resource seeking the type of investment will provide very little interactions. So therefore the productivity spillover effect is very weak, if any. But for market seeking, probably there are more opportunities for local firms to connect, to be interactive, so therefore you will see a stronger productivity effect. So some other people are talking about absorptive capacity of local firms, as we all can understand, if they are already advanced, a little bit advanced, so they may take in more from local firms, from foreign firms. Lava, can we have another one? Yeah. So apart from that spillover effect, which I said that was the conventional channel, in this paper, we introduced another channel, and that is the signaling effect. Now, we all know signaling effect, meaning, so if we all know that, we know that what the endorsement effect is. So we need to have a good network when we are publishing, when we are doing research, and that can have a signaling effect. The same thing here. There are some paper in which people provided some evidence that if local firms, if they do something together with foreign investors, and that can be seen as a kind of positive endorsement effect. And that can help local firms to set up more connections and to do better. And so our question in this direction, we actually ask the following question. Does the Chinese government's involvement in this type of infrastructure project provide a kind of a signaling effect? You may say no. You can argue why, because you see, okay, people know that you are here to explore natural resources, so I do not trust you, and it's not good for the local. You can argue that. But in this paper, we argue there will be a positive signaling effect based on the following two theories. So one is the institutional theory, and the other is the resource-based view. And this is another theory in management, or IB. So yes, there is a problem in terms of illegitimacy, mercy problem. So people will see Chinese SOEs illegitimate in their host country. However, we think the institutional support can overcome that, and particularly this type of project are financed by the Chinese government. So based on the institutional theory, the government can be involved in two ways. One is to hold the ownership of that Chinese investor, and the other is they create a lot of industry policies that can support Chinese SOEs who are undertaking those type of projects. So anyway, so I gave you some names here, so you can check if you like. But the resource-based view is more like, because the Chinese firms are more competitive in that local area. So the local firms, by interacting with those Chinese firms, they can obtain some kind of advantage, because based on the resource-based view. So Lava? Yes, so this is the hypothesis. So based on, we have some more discussions in the paper about why we think there will be a positive productivity effect, but not only productivity spillover effect, but also the signaling effect. So therefore, we have hypothesis 1 here. We have hypothesis 2. So hypothesis 1 refers to the productivity spillover effect based on institutional support, and also the resource-based theory view. And the second one, again, the same thing. We argue there is a signaling effect also based on those theories. And in terms of the absorptive capacity, we do have some literature, but this is like we take absorptive capacity as a moderating factor. So if we check the moderating effect, we can say we can actually conjecture that the productivity spillover effect should be more profound for foreign firms operating in Africa as compared to local indigenous African firms. And we can conjecture that the signaling effect, on the other hand, should be more profound for indigenous African firms. And the argument is, as compared to the foreign firms in Africa, those indigenous African firms are relatively weak in terms of their absorptive capacity. Lava? Yeah, so this is my last transparency for me. So here I just summarize our analytical framework. So you can see that so we are here, we focused on infrastructure projects. We talk about the involved Chinese firms. We identified the involved local firms, and they are working on the same project, so they have to be interactive with each other. And our purpose of this study is to analyze whether or not this type of interaction will have some impact on local firm performance. I mentioned the two channels. One is the productivity spillover channel, which should be positive on local firm performance. I also mentioned the signaling effect channel, which should also be positive on local firm performance. As a kind of moderating factor, if we pick up this absorptive capacity, then they work through different channels. So if local firm is very strong in innovation, everything is relatively stronger, then that will enhance the productivity spillover effect. Otherwise, on the other hand, if they have a stronger absorptive capacity, that will actually reduce the signaling effect because they are already stronger. The asymmetric information problem is actually lower than that can reduce the signaling effect. Anyway, so that's the framework and that's the theory. So I hope I mean, Lava is going to take over now, so I hope people can keep those in mind when we digest how we implement our empirical analysis. Lava, thank you. Lava is yours.
Thank you, Professor. And I'll start with the data and sample for the study. We sourced our data from Chinese Investment Global Tracker, audited annual reports, online reports, Thomson Reuters data stream, and African Financial Database. We started with China Global Investment Tracker, which is created by Heritage Foundation, and it consists of China overseas investments and construction contracts. So from there, we identify the Chinese SOEs, and we match it with the transaction party, local transaction party. And from there, we were able to identify 88 local firms that are involved. And we matched the information of these local firms with their corresponding financial report from Thomson Reuters data stream, African Financial data stream, the audited annual reports. And at the end of the day, we have a panel of 649 non-financial firms. And this is scaled based on the accounting and financial data available during the year 2010 and 2021. The table shows the distribution of our firm, the sample firm. And for these particular studies, the ability or the decision for a firm, a local firm, to be involved in infrastructural projects in Africa, the local firm, is not random. And because of that, we have to also sample the non-interactive firm. So the interactive firm will be they are the treatment group, while the non-interactive firm are the control group. And also our data, the 88 worker firm that we sought from the China China Global Investment Tracker, we have different types of firm. We have the African listed firm, we have the foreign firm, and also the African non-listed firm, which comprises of private firm and government parastatal. And from the table, our firms, local firm, that is the transaction party, that actually undertake the China Africa infrastructural projects in Africa, 88 total. And also for the non-interactive firm, they are 561. And these are actually scaled by the the availability of accounting and financial data. Also, we also have industrial distribution of our sample firms, comprises of primary industry, manufacturing industry, the service industry. And from the table, as we can see, the second on primary industry, the second column, we can see that for Africa listed firm, there are more firms, Africa listed firm than the other firms, other categories of firms that are involved in the China Africa infrastructural project. And invariably, the majority of the firms, the sample firms, the interactive firms under study, they are from primary industry. And in a way, it's still showing that the Chinese investors focused on the resources oriented firms in Africa, which will be able to know whether they are resource seeking or not. And also, like Professor said in the theory, there are assisted theory that said that for market seeking FDI in service and manufacturing industry, there is probability of productivity spillover, but for resource seeking FDI, there is a weak probability of productivity spillover. For interactive firms and non-interactive firms, and we have the mean for the interactive firm based on our variables under studies, the performance variable, the infrastructural project variable. We have the firm level variables and also the micro factors variables. So we compare these variables of the interactive firms and the non-interactive firms, and from the mean difference, which is on the second to last column, and the T statistics, we can see that there is significant difference between the variables under study of the treatment group and the control group. And basically, the highlight of this is that we can see that the interactive firms are more export-oriented. That is, they involved more in export activities, and also they are from the resource-oriented industry, and also they have large market size than the non-interactive firms. Also, we also compare the African listed interactive firms with the foreign interactive firms, and also there's a huge significant difference between their mean and this with this T statistics. You can see that the foreign interactive firms perform better when we look at the performance indicators variable, the return on sales and labor productivity, the accounting performance, we can see that the foreign interactive firms performs better than the African interactive firms. Also, when we look at the firm level variable, the firm size, we can see that definitely the foreign interactive firms are more larger than the African interactive firms, which is expected. And also, we can also see that the foreign firms are more research innovative. They have good firm capability, which is measured, which is a proxy for absorptive capacity than the African firms. And also, we can see that for foreign firms, they are more export oriented. They are also from the primary industry. Also, they have a large market size than the African firms. So better overall, we can see that the statistics of relating to the variables under study for the foreign firms are much more better. There's a significant difference between the statistics of both firms. Now, empirical model, the strategy for the study, we employ average treatment effect model. And because, like I said before, under the data and sample, the decision of a local firm to receive China infrastructural investment is random. And in a way, we might encounter sample selection biases. So because of that, we employ a model by Ekman and modified by Mani. So in 2004, in order to treat the sample selection problem and also to control for heterogeneity. And from this model, we have the first equation, which is the treatment equation. And we have the probability of the counterpart, which is proxy as the firm interaction. That is the relationship between the Chinese SOEs and the African sample firm via the infrastructure project. And also in the second equation, which is the outcome model, we incorporate the counterpart as an independent variable to see whether China, the relationship between China and Africa through their firms, both firms, via the infrastructural project, actually enhances the performance of vocal firm in Africa. And these firms can be African listed firms, they can be foreign firms operating in Africa, and also non-African listed firm in Africa. And also we have, for the equation model, we have the firm level variable size, we have research and development, expenditure, sales growth, we have the leverage, the cash flow, expected orientation, the past performance, whether, and also we also have the macroeconomic factors, like the primary industry, the industry where the firms are actually in, and also the gross capital, the market size of the firm, and also we have the COVID effect, and also institutional distance, which is also an important variable in the treatment model, because we must have a variable, a special restriction variable that we actually lower the interaction between the first equation and the second equation. And also for the second equation, which is the outcome equation, we have the counterpart, which is the main independent variable, and other firm level variable. And we run the two, the equation 1 and 2, we run them simultaneously to actually using the full information maximum likelihood procedure. And the reason why the justification for that is because the error term in the first equation, there's probability that the error term, there's a bivariate normal distribution between the error term in the first equation and the second equation. Our variables of the study, we have the main variable, which is the counterpart, which is the independent variable, and is simply firm interaction. That is the interaction between Chinese SOEs and the Africa or the local firm, not Africa per se, because we have foreign firm also. We have the interaction between the Chinese SOE firm and and the Africa and the local firm via infrastructural projects. That is, the African firm are transaction party, or the local firm are transaction party in this infrastructure project. And this is measured as a binary variable, which takes a value of 1 if the focal firm, whether African listed firm or foreign foreign firm operating in Africa, which they are listed, and also whether they are non-African listed firm, whether they are local counterparts of the infrastructural project, otherwise it is 0. And also our dependent variable, which is the performance variable, we measure this using the market value. The market value added is used. We want to use it to scale to see whether there is a signaling effect or not. And also we have return on sales and labor productivity, which is accounting performance, which is we want to use to see whether there is productivity spillover effect. And also we have the firm level variable in line with some existing literature, firm size, research and development. We have sales growth, cash flow, and export orientation and performance. So, like I said before, we include an exclusion restriction variable, which is an important variable in the treatment equation. And also, we also include primary industry and gross domestic product to control for the resource and market seeking motives. Now, to the result, we have the treatment, the equation 1 result of the average treatment effect model. And here, the counterpart is the dependent variable. So we want to see what motivated the Chinese investors to actually select a local firm to be their counterparts in actually undertaking infrastructural projects in Africa. And from the table, as you can see, that firm size really matters. So the firm size of the firms, or the firms you can see in the column 2, that the firm size of the firm matters, the research and expenditure also matters. But what we are concerned about is the difference between the firm and, as you can see, for African firms and the foreign firms, research and development matters. But for the non-listed firm, it doesn't matter whether they are research oriented or not. So to be a local counterpart in China infrastructural project. And also for all the firms across the table, export orientation matters for all the firms. So firms that are actually undertake some export activities, they are more likely to be a counterpart, whether they're African listed firm or foreign firms or African non-listed firm, they are actually likely to be a counterpart in the China infrastructural projects in Africa. And also the primary market, that is the market, the industry which that firms belongs to, also matters. That is, the if the firm they are from resource-oriented markets, so they are more likely to be part of the transaction as a transaction party for the undertaking of the China infrastructural project. And also the market size matter, which is proxy with the gross domestic product across all the firms. And also the exclusion restriction variable, which is the institutional distance. We can see that it is significant, and it is significant for all the firms, which invariably validates the use of these variables and exclusion restriction variables. And also going to the main equation, which is the outcome equation. Here, the dependent variable are the performance indicators for variable. The market value added, the resource return on sales, and labor productivity. But here we have the market value added, which is proxy for stock market valuation. And we can see, because we excluded the African non-listed firms because they don't have data for market value added, and because they are not listed on the stock exchange, so there's no way we can get the stock market data for them. So we are left with the African listed firms and the foreign firms, and we can see from the slide that our main variable of discussion, which is the counterpart. So it's significant for all the firms, which invariably means that being part of China African infrastructural projects, actually, that is firm interaction as a result of the infrastructural projects in Africa, enhances the market value added of the firm. Invariably, it means that it actually improves, enhances the stock market valuation of the VOCA firms. And we can also see that the standard coefficient for the African listed firm is more than the foreign firms. So that means this is more pronounced for the African listed firms than the foreign firms. And this is in line with the Signali theory, that is being a counterpart in China-Africa relationship or firm interaction, actually send positive signals to the investors about the involved firms. So, and also we can see, looking at the firm level variables, they have the expected signs and significance, and we can see that well, one major thing, one difference is that we can see that research expenditure, export orientation is not significant. It doesn't matter for the African listed firm, but it is significant for the foreign firms. Though that means though with African firm, the research and expenditure not significant, it doesn't really have effect on the on counterpart increases for African listed firm. So that means for signaling effects on this particular model is based on the perception of the investors, not necessarily on the firm capability. And also we have the wild test of independent, which is significant, and also the chi-square of the y-c is also significant, which signifies we justify the use of ATE model. And the second result, on the second indicator of the performance variable, we have the return on sales. And as you can see, that our variable counterpart, the main independent variable, is only significant for the foreign firms. But why is this? But when we look at the firm level variables across for all the firms, we can see that for size, firm size, it is significant for all the firms, but for the research expenditure, it's only significant for foreign firms. That means that research innovation really matters in increase of performance, return on sales, accounting performance for the foreign firms. And also, when we look at the export orientation, so it is also significant for the foreign firms. So in a way, we try to explain that maybe the positive relationship between the counterpart, the China-Africa infrastructure relationship between China SOEs and the foreign firms that's enhancing the return on sales of the foreign firm might be attributed to the firm level, firm capability, that is the absorptive capacity of the foreign firm. Also, if we check the model fit, also is significant, which signifies that the model is good. Also for the labor productivity, also we can also see that for the main variable, the counterpart is also significant. for the foreign listed firm, but not for indigenous African firm. So invariably, it means that for the accounting performance, which is measured at the return on sales and labor productivity, the productivity spillover holds for the foreign firms only, not for African firms. And we can also see from the slide, the column 4, the foreign firms, we can see that research and development is significant, and also the export orientation is significant. So it's also attributed to the firm factors capability, which measure the firm absorptive capacity. And the summary of the result invariably for the treatment equation, which is the first equation, we can actually deduce that China-Africa infrastructure investment in Africa via the infrastructural projects are mainly driven by the firm size, research and development, export orientation. It is market seeking, it is resources seeking, and also the institutional factors difference matters. And we are also, we were able to obtain evidence in line with the existing literature that China investors in Africa are resource seeking and market seeking. And on the outcome equation, we were able to find evidence that for all the firms, signaling channel actually is pronounced, but it is more pronounced for African listed firm based on the standardized coefficient than for the foreign firms in Africa, operating in Africa. And also, we were able to find that the foreign firms benefit from the firm interaction, through both channel, that is this productivities spillover channel and signaling channel. And we can attribute this difference because we were unable to find an evidence for the indigenous Africa listed firm for productivity spillover. So we actually come up that because of the stronger absorptive capacity of the foreign firm than the African indigenous firm. So in a way, it actually explains the reason why productivity spillover effect is more pronounced for the firms, foreign firms in Africa. Also, in order to actually validate our exclusion restriction variable, and also to use another model, we use for our robustness to check. So we use two-stage least square to check our main model, the ATE model, whether it is valid or not. So, but here we proxy the counterpart. Instead of using counterpart as a proxy for firm interaction, we actually use the size of investment. We use the value instead of dummy variable. We use the size of investment this time around. And for the first stage, we have the variables, the firm level variables, and the macro effect macro factors variable, whether it is explain the reason why there's influx of China infrastructure investments in Africa. And also we use the fitted value in the first stage. We incorporate that the fitted value of the infrastructure size into the second stage, alongside with other control variables. And the major reason for using this approach is to control for heterogeneity between because there is usually heterogeneity problem between foreign investment and firm performance, and also to validate our instrument, the exclusion restriction instrument, which is the institutional distance. And this is measured as the difference between China Economic Freedom Score and the score of the host country in Africa. And it is justified because past literature actually reported that high institutional disparity, high institutional factors differences between the foreign investor home country, and the host country usually lowers the expected foreign investment because the multinational enterprises, they suffer adaptation costs as a result of that, and this can also have an effect on their profit and investment motivation. So we have is the summarized result of the two-stage least square, and our variable of concern, which is the size of investment. As we can see, that for all the firms, we have the first stage, and we have the first stage, which is where the size of investment is the dependent variable, and the second stage is the fitted value for the size of investment. And we actually try to see the relationship of that on the performance indicators, the three performance indicators, and we can see that the size of investment, or the first stage. Let me talk about the first stage first. We can see that also for this model, research and expenditure also matters. The market also matters, and the resource-oriented industry also matters. And the major concern, the institutional dissonance, is significant, and it is negative, which invariably it means that the more, or the larger the differences between the institutional factors of the home country and the home country and the recipient country, the lower the investments, the size of investment. So, and we can also see that the Craig Donald was the statistics is 68.42, which is higher than the stock Yogo weak ID test, which invariably we are rejecting the null hypothesis that the instrument is not weak, that the instrument is weak. But so as we can see, this justifies that, or invariably it validates the use of institutional distance as an instrumental variable. And also looking at the second stage, we can see that for the African listed firm, the result is more pronounced. For African listed firm, it is significant. The size of the investment is significant. It enhances the performance, the market performance of Africa, and this, in a way, we provide an implication that for the policymaker and also for the African firms, the policymaker has to what they have to incentivize the innovative activities of the African firm so that they can also benefit from the interaction, and also the African firm, because there is research and development on ground, but it is not sufficient enough to actually enhance the relationship between the counterpart and the firm performance, the accounting firm performance. So African firms should also examine the efficiency of this absorptive capacity needed to absorb the productivity spillover effect. So thank you, and comments are welcome.
Thank you very much, both Hong and Lawal. I think Hong, you motivated the work and provided the background and the literature, the hypothesis so clearly, and Lawal, you presented the evidence and discussed it so interestingly. At this time, I would like to open the discussion to the floor. Being a chair and also a court at the same time, I don't think I have anything much to add. Hong and Rodiat have completely smashed all the main issues, but we can engage in the discussion and try to see areas to address, especially as this is work in progress. Containing views, alternative interpretations of the evidence, and also did we miss a big elephant in the room? Okay, I can see a hand up from Linda, and then our own Carlos. So let's start with the Linda, and then next Carlos. Please go ahead, Linda.
Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. My name is Linda Calabrese, and I work at ODI as a research fellow, and I work on similar topics as well, so I've learned a lot from your presentation. I have a question on the data, actually. So you mentioned that for Chinese infrastructure or FDI, you use CGIT, the China Global Investment Tracker data. But as far as I know, that is not just investment data, that also includes loan data. So if I look at some countries that I know well, for example, I can see that some things that are listed under that database is actually part of lending with, you know, it's sovereign loan to the government, with, you know, contracts that are available, and we know the interest rate, and we know the grace periods, and so on. So actually, I think that database mixes a lot of infrastructure, of investment and lending. And so I'm not sure, you know, it's the best source of data for this. I wanted to know if you have addressed this question, or if you have addressed this problem in any way, or what do you think about that? Thank you.
Thank you for those observations on the data. And maybe on this one, I need to go back to Rodiat in terms of how easy it is to disentangle the investment data from the lending data.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are able to actually distinguish between the from the, it wasn't specified there whether the investment is lending or, but we have there the construction project contract. And what we did is that we look at the project that they've worked in Africa, and also we identify the Chinese SOEs and also the counterparts for the construction project contract. So we just match them together. So that's what we do. So, but the China Global Investment Tracker didn't actually specify whether it is lending or investment in general.
Yeah, Hong, you want to come in? Yeah,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
So
Yeah.
thanks for your question. I think the question is very relevant because I also mentioned in my presentation that it has already been a literature, sub-literature on the similar topic, and that is the Chinese lending. So if you want, I can send you maybe 2 major papers on lending. But in terms of, so there are a data set which is called the aid data, and they have more detailed lending information. For this one, so the reason why we use this global investment tracker data is that they can help us to match local firms. So other data sets, no matter, you know, FDI data, market data, and Boston, they have their data as well. And they, aid data contains aid projects, but also infrastructure projects, which we are interested in. But we are interested in, we need the a piece of additional information, and that is the connection, and that is who are the local counterparts of the Chinese project. So for that reason, we rely on this, but they do not provide the breakdown of the lending. So the sources of financing is not clear. But we do not need that in our paper because we focused on whether the connection can create some benefits for local firm. But as I said, there is another sub-literature on Chinese lending. Very often, as you can imagine, it's secret. But people are trying very hard to estimate the figures based on their own models, but no matter what you do, China is the largest lender to developing countries at the moment. So,
Yeah,
but as I can send you 2 papers on lending, but this is not our focus in this project.
Thank you, Rodiat, and thank you, Hong. Before I go to Carlos, maybe let me come back to Linda, because I know from my earlier discussion with Dak that you guys at ODI are doing a lot of work and following up developments on FDI in the China side. Is there something you are suggesting in terms of the way the data is handled here to what you would otherwise do?
Actually, no, that's why I'm asking, because I think it's
Okay.
very, very difficult, meaning that database mixes investment, like the CGIT mixes investment and lending. So I would just go and separate one by one. But of course, for 50 African countries, is a huge bit of work, So yeah, exactly. So that's why I was curious, actually.
Okay, thanks. I think we had the same, kind of discussion on these issues when I met you at your office in ODI. So thank you very much for bringing out this important question. Carlos, our colleague at SOAS, also works greatly on Africa. So thanks, Carlos, for joining us at this seminar. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you to the speakers for a very stimulating presentation. This is indeed a very important topic. So I just have a couple of, one comment and a question for clarification. And actually, the comment is linked to Linda's point on the definition of these flows. And I think this is a very general problem that anyone using these data sets always suffers from. But it is a semantic issue, but it's an important semantic issue. So if you use the word investment, then there is a problem, because indeed, I agree with Linda, I know the data set, it does include things that are not, strictly speaking, investments, right? So it's a mixture of information that takes the form of finance for infrastructure. So a project is basically, as an observation, is put on the data set based on the lending information. In other cases, actually, what you get is the size of a project in the form of contracted revenues by the contractor. Okay, again, that is a different concept, because strictly speaking, for many of these companies, this is export of construction services. So the contracted revenues of these companies is equivalent to the exports of contracted services and not to a foreign direct investment. So I think one way, to be constructive, one way around this would be to, rather than call these investments, to refer to infrastructure projects. If this is what this is referring to, this is an infrastructure project, the size of which is determined by the lending or the contracted revenues of the contractor, etc. Then you could try to make the connection between the linkage with this infrastructure project and the performance of these different firms. So I think it's not a pedantic question. It's actually a very important semantic issue, because a lot of people are likely to misinterpret these as actual investments when they are not, in many cases, proper investments. The second question I have was more about the breakdown of the African firms that have been, participants or non-participants. And I think in one of the tables you presented, you had primary manufacturing and services, and the manufacturing was a very, very small set. But I was wondering, my expectation was that actually a lot of the firms that we have would have some connection and some spillover effects from these projects, these infrastructure projects, might be construction firms. So did you have a way of further breaking down the sectorial divide and making slightly more granular division between, construction firms, what kinds of services firms, and so on? Or is it not possible given the data that you have? Because that would be very, very interesting to actually zoom in and focus just on African construction firms, because there is a little bit in the literature that suggests that the spillover effects between infrastructure projects and local construction firms are quite weak, partly because of the subcontracting arrangements. And therefore the potential for learning, for learning by being part of these infrastructure projects is somewhat weakened because of the type of subcontracting arrangements that tend to dominate in many of these projects. And this is not just only for Chinese firms, by the way, it's also for other foreign contractors, big, large foreign contractors who tend to subcontract with other foreign firms before subcontracting to African firms, at least in some of the contexts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Very important comments and questions. I think the first one on semantics it comes out very nicely. I think the writing making it very clear exactly, what it is that is being engulfed in a investment or interpretation with the flows, the definition of the flows. The second one on the breakdown of African farms, I know from another study I'm involved in, which is on FDI in Africa. When we take the various sectors, fortunately for that paper, we are able to get infrastructure as a category on its own. So we actually have about 7 categories, including construction. Yes, construction as on its own. I'm not sure. Maybe I should go back now to Rodiat and Hong to see whether the granular data on construction is feasible or possible, given the positive data, on this.
Prof?
But we'll have to explain it in one way, whether whether it's available or not. We have to explain it. Yeah.
Lawal, you can just mention the industry breakdowns because you collected the data. Do you know? Yeah. So you can.
We can actually identify the construction firms, but the problem is that I think there will still be small number based on our, our sample data is small already. So, but there is an information because from there, the name of the firms, the local transaction party firms are there, African transaction. So from there, we can actually find which industry, whether they are if it is manufacturing, like are they in construction or something. So it is possible to actually do that, but I'm just concerned about the to run analysis for that.
We'll definitely look into this because the argument of construction and the relevance to the infrastructure investment is very compelling. There is no way a referee will miss it. A good thing Carlos has been able to troubleshoot that, and we need to address it, I think. Yeah. Yes, Hong.
So thanks, Carlos. Good to see you. And I think both questions are very relevant. But let me let me start from the second one, then I'll mention the first one. So I think that's a very relevant one because the spillover effect will differ across different industries. And as you said, that resource-oriented construction firms, they do not have that much room to learn and to adapt. But for service, it's more important. And as Lawal mentioned, our involved firms are very, very small. It's 88 in total, including different sectors. But I think, Lawal, we should go back to the project that they involved themselves, because the project contains the information on the industry, on what the project is. So by that, we will think about it. We can identify the nature, the industry of the project, therefore the firm, the local firm, the industry in which they operate. So that can be something. And but by the way, let's say service firms, you see something, but they are, because we are working on the involved firms as the treated firms, we need to have a larger base to compare with. So therefore, a lot of firms are actually in the control group rather than in the involved group. But we can still improve in this respect. And in terms of your first comments, again, it is relevant. And I have to say, the lending data is very difficult to get. So, but I'm very confident in saying that in the among those projects that we work on, most of them are undertaken by Chinese SOEs. We can use the size of the project. I think it's more accurate, and it doesn't change our empirical strategy. But thank you. I see your point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very constructive discussion there. I'm just hunting for Catherine. Catherine is also doing studies on Chinese investment in Africa, but is actually focusing using primary instruments, Christian instruments for Ghana, Zambia, Uganda, and Kenya. And but I think it appears she's not around in this meeting. Would have helped us in terms of what data she has come up that might be different from what Lawal. But we'll have a discussion with her on the sidelines of other activities in the Center for Global Finance. Okay, so let me run around and see whether any questions, comments, contributions. We do have quite here a number of distinguished scholars working on the area of China and Africa. In the case of any questions, comments, observations, let me see in the chat. Oh, is the recording still taking place, Asina?
Yes, Victor.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, no comments in the chat. So I go back to see if there is a hand up for comments, observations, questions from any of the participants. There is a hand. Oladapo. Please
Hello.
go up. Oladapo, our emerging scholar. Yeah, go up. Go ahead and yeah.
Yeah, Rodiat, thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, I just have a question. I think during the presentation, you mentioned the fact that African firms that are export-oriented are likely to get into partnership with the Chinese investment in Africa. So I'm just thinking, do you have like more information as to where the exports are actually going to? Because it might just be there might just be a bias there where you know, these investments are going to African firms that are exporting to China. Do you by chance have any information on the flow of that trade, export trade by African companies? Thank you.
Okay, I think that's very, very important. You are looking for a possible insight into whether basically there is like a three-way direction, basically investment from China going into African farms and African farms remitting the exports back to China.
Exactly.
Yeah, on the ground, I think it does happen, but I'm not sure that we have tracked that relationship, feedback relationship in our study. But let me see. I think we have actually there's a number of when the infrastructure investments taken up in African countries. Yeah, some of the exports end up going into China or of course other African countries. But I'm not sure whether it is possible to capture this in the data we have. Yes.
Let me add something, and then maybe Lava. So I think the issue that I think you raised is connected to the way how the Chinese loan is repaid, mainly. If there is a trade, there are some trades, the trade something relationship, but we controlled a market variable. So that we did not control trade, bilateral trade directly, but we control the market size of the country, of the host country. But I think more importantly for this issue is that a lot of, actually many African firms are involved in repaying, i.e. they negotiate with the African governments, different countries' governments. They agreed that by exporting some commodities, even coffee beans, to China for the next 5 or 10 years, this accounts for a proportion of repayment. So and we actually in this project we have not touched upon the repayment of the financing. Actually, we did not touch upon the financing side. And for the firms, so you asked whether or not we have some firms like that. Actually, unfortunately, this type of firms are very often non-listed firms because they are representing the government. So the government bureaus, ministries, I do not know whether ministries are the right terms, but they are connected with the government, they agreed and they repay. But we do not have data. So that's a pity of this data. Actually, we cannot get that. Lava, you may add more on that.
All right, thank you, Oladapo. That's a very good question. And our focus is on the firm interaction, and we have to control for different control variables. And we were more concerned about the fact that because of the resource-seeking motive, and if a firm exports more, they are export-oriented, so they are more likely to be a counterpart. So we don't really focus on the fact that maybe they are exporting. It's just a factor that they are exporting firms. Since they are exporting firms, they are likely to be a counterpart of that China-Africa infrastructural project, to be a local counterpart. So we are not really tracking whether there is the export activities is between the China or other countries. It's just for the fact that they are exporting firms. To compare it from non-exporting firms. So the exporting firms, that is, they are exporting, they are likely to be selected by the Chinese SOEs to be counterparts because it will aid the resource for finance infrastructure deal. So that's my answer. We are not really focusing.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that.
Yes,
Let
thanks
Mr.
indeed.
get something.
Yes, therefore you have raised a very
Definitely,
important
yeah.
question. I think we shall in the paper acknowledge that it's part of the Chinese investment model in Africa to actually sometimes require a repayment, say in terms of commodities or exports, but also explain that, put a caveat that it's not something we're exploring in this particular paper. Yeah. Okay. I think. Oh yes, my good old friend Michael Henry from the University of Birmingham. Please, Michael, please go ahead.
Okay, Victor. I joined the presentation very late, so I saw very little. I just only saw when the estimating equation was being discussed. I just wanted to know if the study is able to determine, let's say, which sectors, let's say, the exporting firms are located. Basically, are there exports of primary products or is it exports of manufacturers? So I just wanted to know, if one could distinguish in terms of where the exports are coming from. I'm a bit confused in terms of in the sense that I'm hearing about investments, but then I'm also hearing about sort of repayments, which supposed to suggest that it's a loan arrangement. Could you just sort of clarify for me that I'm a bit confused about that. In that if exports is tied to some repayment of a loan.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Michael. Yeah.
because Victor, I made the trouble, so I read that repayment. So let me respond. So for that repayment, actually, we do not. Let me take this repayment arrangement out. For maybe there are some export-oriented firms. They are involved in export or trade with China, and that kind of export may be connected to the repayment that is mainly arranged by the government. But we do not have that information. So we say export orientated, they may contain repayment, but they may not. We do not really, we have no sources to distinguish between them. However, you mentioned where are those export-oriented firms from? We can identify the industries. So whether they are related to the primary natural resources sector, etc. We can do that. We can go further to just. But for repayment is something that I added. Maybe I should not have mentioned that. It's a little bit complicated, but as I said, repayment is done by the government, and government ask some other firms to be involved, but we do not know that in our firms. Lava, is that correct?
Yes, because we focus on the firm level study. So if we are going to the repayment, that means we want to focus on the country level study. So there's data for that, but it's for country level, not for the firms. So, but we are trying to actually look at the firm interaction, that is the Chinese SOEs and the FOCA firms in Africa. So that's what we are looking at.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And
And also about, about the export orientation. We is a variable. We were just concerned about not about the breakdown per se. It's just for us to know is it a firm capability. If you are export oriented, will that enhance your performance also? And will it be like a moderating variable for the counterpart, being a counterpart? Will that also enhance the increase in the counterpart on the performance variable of the FOCA firm? So to split whether they are we are actually, because of the data though, is something we can actually try out, but the export orientation is just to see whether it is a firm level capability that enhances, that is a moderating variable for the counterpart in increasing the performance of the FOCA firm. Thank you.
thank you, Hong and Rodiat, and thanks, Michael, for some of those observations. And I think there is a slide. If you want to go back, Rodiat, one slide before, I think in the outcome equations, maybe slide 20.
Okay.
19.
19.
Go back one. One again. Keep going back.
Is it okay like this, or I should quit?
Yeah, keep going back.
Yeah.
Yeah, back. Okay. Back. Oh yeah. Okay, this is where the industrial distribution, because Michael said he came in late, but maybe we had covered this part whereby these are the farms, African listed farms, African unlisted farms, foreign farms, which are foreign farms but based in Africa. And then the industrial distribution into primary industry, manufacturing industry, and service industry. Yeah. Okay. Any other observations, comments, contributions? Well, we only have 18 minutes remaining. So it may well be that all the comments have been exhausted, but this is work in progress. If you think of any other observation, question, please send it to us. And also we shall make available the recording from this seminar to enable you add further to this ongoing work. I know I was expecting some questions on some of the issues which may not be so apparent in the presentation, but which in most of the corporate finance work, especially involving farms, the age of the farm plays an important role. However, you are thinking that would be the case where it is possible to explore more than 10 factors, but because of the nature of the data being, recent data, age is not put into contradiction here, but we can acknowledge in a footnote that age might be an important explanation. The other important result that emerges from this, which is very contemporary, is the COVID effect. The COVID-19 effect stands out in these regressions, and that's an important issue to report, because we know that COVID was a countervailing effect. Indeed, has a negative impact on the outcomes of this. So it's one sector where, unlike many other sectors, where in many countries, both in Africa and elsewhere, had packages specially designed to minimize the virility or the negative impact of the COVID shock. This is not the same in the China trade, but we think that it has very much countervailed in the interaction of Chinese farms with the African farms, at least as witnessed in the evidence. There is also a strand of literature now in corporate finance, especially in Africa, that tends to dwell to distinguish between farms and politically connected farms, how politically connected farms in Africa behave. I think we've not really put a spotlight on politically connected farms, especially the argument that the participating African farms, rather than African listed farms and African non-listed farms, may have political connections. Maybe that's because it might not be easy to distinguish this, but we acknowledge that it's an important dimension in the literature. Maybe I can ask give 1 minute Hong to just give a final say, and Ms. Rodiat a final say, and then we close the seminar.
Yeah. So Victor, so you mentioned the COVID. We have already have this one in the model, the COVID dummy. And for African politically connected firms, I think that's interesting. And we will think about it if referee, I mean, we are now dealing with referees, right? So let's see what we can do in terms of politically connect. But there are some papers that already examined the location of Chinese investment in Africa, and they found out they are all politically connected. So they some projects are taking to the hometown of some politicians, etc. When that president was making the deal with so etc. There is a literature. So I agree. And firm age is the common factor. I think we had that some time ago, Lava. You missed it now. Well, why did we?
I dropped it when it was significant.
Was not significant. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
That's why I dropped it.
Okay, then we can maybe add a note.
I added
the
research and
so
development.
that's great.
The footnote, yeah.
Yeah. So, so you asked me to summarize. Actually, yeah, I thank everybody for their contributions. In terms of the comments, and we are. I have to be honest, we have been rejected already a couple of times, but we are working on that even harder, and let's see what we can, where we can go. And thanks for your patience, and all the suggestions are welcome. If you want to send me email or ask emails, and we will appreciate it. So that's everything I can say. And we are going to work further on the policy implications, I have to say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, Carlos.
Carlos, you want to come again?
No, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you, Carlos.
Thank
you.
Rodiat, do you have anything to add?
No, just to appreciate everybody for their comments and for their time. So, and we will appreciate it if you have any suggestions to make the paper much better. So we'll appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Great work indeed. Thank you, both Hong and Rodiat. Rodiat, you have fantastic presentation skills. Yes, indeed. And so we thank you all for our comments, observations, and for your time in participating in this seminar. So bye-bye for now until
Victor,
next week.
Sorry, Victor, before you go, where can the paper be accessed?
Yes, the paper is being drafted, should be out and available in about 2 weeks, and we shall send you a copy and also put a version on the CGF working paper series.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Victor, you said 2 weeks, okay?
Yes, 2 weeks,
absolutely.
yeah. Wrapped up in a very short time. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Constructive comments. Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.